There are some cases where the deeper the investigation goes, the harder the truth becomes to see. And sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't the evidence itself. It's the feeling that everything seems to make sense. Until one small detail appears and destroys the entire story. In March of 2003, in the quiet suburbs of Knoxville, Tennessee, a man named David Leath was found dead in his own bedroom. At first glance, everything looked like a case of self-inflicted death. But only minutes after entering the scene, investigators began to realize something didn't feel right. A gun lying beside the bed, unusual details throughout the room, and one woman standing at the center of it all, his wife, Raynella Leath. To this day, this remains one of the most controversial criminal cases in Tennessee. Because after more than a decade of investigations, courtroom battles, and endless debate, no one truly knows what happened inside that bedroom on that March morning. And what makes this case so haunting is that everyone who looks at it sees a different version of the truth. That night began like any other ordinary night. There were no obvious signs of a major argument, no reports of screaming. No one imagined that only hours later, everything would change forever. When the emergency call came in the next morning, the voice on the other end sounded panicked. "My husband, he's not waking up." As law enforcement officers walked through the hallway of the house, everything was almost completely silent. No television, no footsteps, only a heavy atmosphere hanging over the bedroom at the end of the hall. David Leath lay on the bed, 57 years old, a well-liked barber in a small town. A man known for being polished, confident, and friendly. At first glance, the case appeared straightforward. But then, investigators started taking a closer look. A few details inside the room didn't fully match what they typically saw in cases like this. The position of the gun, the impact angles, several small details around the bed. Individually, none of them seemed especially alarming, but once everything was placed together, the scene began to feel difficult to explain. And that was when all attention shifted toward Raynella Leath. If you met Raynella in person, many people would probably never imagine she could be connected to a case that captured national attention. She was calm, intelligent, elegant. The kind of person who walks into a room and immediately draws attention. But what confused many people the most was that Raynella didn't fit the public image of someone suspected in a serious criminal case. She controlled her emotions extremely well. Too well. And sometimes that made people even more uncomfortable. But that wasn't the strangest part, because David Leath was not the first husband of Raynella's to die under controversial circumstances. Years earlier, her first husband, Ed Dawson, had reportedly died in what was considered a farming accident. For years, almost no one questioned it, until David died. That was when people started looking back at the past in a completely different way. In a small town where everyone knows everyone else's business, rumors spread quickly, and then the questions began. Was this simply a tragic series of coincidences, or had something been hidden for years? What made the case especially complicated was the near total absence of direct evidence. No eyewitnesses, no surveillance footage capturing what happened inside the bedroom that morning. No physical evidence strong enough to end the controversy once and for all. The entire case almost revolved around tiny details: witness statements, forensic analysis, crime scene interpretation, and the way each person chose to see them. According to prosecutors, the scene showed signs of staging. They believed what happened in that bedroom was not what it first appeared to be. But the defense presented a completely different perspective. They argued that David had been struggling with serious health and emotional issues at the time. A once strong, independent man suddenly facing the fear of losing himself. And then the defense raised a question that seemed to silence the courtroom. What if everyone had misunderstood the scene from the very beginning? That was the moment the case transformed into a psychological maze. Experts fiercely debated impact angles, crime scene evidence, the body's reactions after severe trauma, and whether it was possible for someone to create such a sequence of events alone. Each side had its own convincing arguments, and perhaps the most disturbing part was that both sides sounded believable. At times, even people who had followed the case for years no longer knew what to believe, because every time one theory began to feel convincing, another detail would emerge and tear it apart. The case stretched on for years. The first trial ended with a hung jury. During the second trial, Raynella was convicted. It seemed like everything was finally over. But then, the conviction was unexpectedly overturned because of legal issues during the trial process. And once again, everything changed. In 2017, a third trial began, possibly the final one. Inside the Knoxville courtroom, the atmosphere was so tense that nearly everyone could feel it. Attorneys reconstructed the crime scene, analyzed every movement, every angle, every tiny detail from the bedroom in 2003. Even the bed where David died was brought into the courtroom. The jury sat silently watching, because they understood their decision could completely change someone's life. And then, just as everyone expected the jury to deliver a final decision, something almost unheard of happened. The judge suddenly stood up and personally ended the entire case. No jury deliberation, no final verdict from the jury, no more trials. The courtroom fell nearly silent. After years of investigations, arguments, and court proceedings, everything ended abruptly, without a completely clear answer. To this day, the Raynella Leath case still divides public opinion. Some believe this was a carefully calculated plan. Others believe Raynella became the victim of suspicion, rumors, and years of public pressure. And perhaps what continues to haunt people about this case isn't only the way David Leath died, but the feeling that everyone who looks at this story walks away with a different truth. After all, no one truly knows what happened inside that bedroom on that March morning in 2003. Only theories remain, conflicting stories. A woman suspected by an entire town for years, and a truth that may have disappeared alongside the man lying on that bed. Some cases terrify people because of how mysterious they are. But sometimes, the most frightening thing is not what we know. It's the feeling that the truth may never be fully discovered. If you had been a member of the jury that day, would you believe this was a self-inflicted death or a staged crime scene? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Real Criminal Story always wants to hear your perspective, because sometimes the detail everyone else ignores is the one that changes how we see the truth. And if you enjoy true crime stories told in a cinematic documentary style, make sure to subscribe to Real Criminal Story and join us for more mysterious cases ahead. Because somewhere out there, there are still many stories that have never been fully explained. And sometimes, the most terrifying truth is hidden inside the spaces left behind.